we are the most distracted humans that have ever, I think, walked the earth. There's so many things out there that are distracting us. Concentration has kind of gone out the window. How can we help our kids focus among all the distractions?
Welcome to the Parent Compass on smartsocial.com podcast. We are honored to be here today with Dr. Christine Carter. Dr. Carter is an author, a speaker, and a coach. She has written 3 books, Raising Happiness, The Sweet Spot, and now The New Adolescence, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction. And we're so happy to have her on today to learn from her expertise. So Dr. Carter, you have made it your life's work looking at the science behind happiness and raising thriving kids, and as a result, happy families. Can you talk to us a little bit about your work at the Greater Good Science Center?
Sure. I'm a sociologist and a senior fellow there. And really my job now, I used to be the executive director, but my job now is I take all the research that's sort of coming in, not just from UC Berkeley and the Greater Good Science Center, but from all over the world that's related to well-being, and try and translate it so that people can use it in their own lives. So I'm really, I've been focused obviously on families and parenting. I'm also really focused on the future of work and how that looks right now. I'm trying to use all the data that's coming in to help us craft our most meaningful lives.
Thank you for taking the time to distill that for us.
In your newest book, you talk about the age of distraction and how that is really impacting our teens and really causing a great deal of anxiety and depression. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you talk about in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are the most distracted humans that have ever, I think, walked the earth. There's so many things out there that are distracting us. And, it's interesting because one of the things that we're seeing because of the pandemic is that most people are having a really hard time focusing, right? Concentration has kind of gone out the window. So there's a huge section of the book that is dedicated to focus as a superpower, right? How can we help our kids focus among all the distractions? And it all applies times like 2 billion now, right? That we're all spending so much more time in front of screens, which impairs our concentration even further.
That's actually a perfect segue into, we happen to be on the platform of smartsocial.com, which their motto is how to shine online and how to keep a clean presentation of who you are online at whatever age, but mostly for teens and tweens. And, smartsocial.com educates parents and schools and educational thought leaders as well. So because so much of your book is set against the backdrop of technology, could you maybe give us maybe 2 or 3 takeaways or a couple great nuggets on things that we could practice at home to be better parents of that adolescent period when it comes to tech?
Absolutely. I thought you were going to ask me to tell you how much screen time is too much, because that is like every other email I get, or like in a total panic. I mean, they used to be panicked about it, but now they're like, okay, they're just on their screens all day, every day, and probably half the night too. Is that okay? Please tell me that's okay. They're going to survive, right?
We need the screens also for the connection in a safe way. So there's that double-edged sword. So yeah, bring the answer to that too.
Yeah, for school and for everything. Okay, so here's my best advice around this. I don't know if we said this already, but I have 4 teenagers, right? So I'm living it. Okay, my best advice is to pick times and places in which there is no technology, right? And so instead of trying to say, okay, your 2 hours of screen time is up, and then engaging in the negotiation about how it doesn't count if they're in Google Docs doing homework, or whatever it is, to let that go. Right? You want them, I mean, with younger kids, you still want to monitor their screen time and everything, but for the most part, trying to enforce limits on the amount of time they're on screens is super unrealistic for most parents, right? Like, we're all taxed as well, and it creates a power struggle that we just don't need right now. And especially given all the new things that they need to connect with their friends, and they need to do their schoolwork and, you know, everything else. Right. Okay. So we're going to let go of the time limits, except for in one case, which I'll come back to. But for the most part, what we need to do is pick times and places in which there is no technology, right? Like they need a break. They can't be on it all the time. And this stuff is addictive. So if you don't sort of enforce the breaks, right, then they will be on it all the time, and it will start to impair their sleep, and you will start to see all kinds of problems. But so picking places. So for us, the kitchen and the dining room, times of day. Oh, another place is the car, right? We're not in the car that much anymore together, but when we are, there's no screens. And no screens when we're eating dinner together. No devices of any sort, visible or audible. You know who's the worst about this is my own mother. She's like, oh, I just want to take a picture and text your brother, right? Like, no, Mom, no screens at the table. So finding like bathrooms are really another great place to try to outlaw screens. It can be kind of hard with older teenagers and husbands, but you know, I mean, like these are hard. It's really easy, I've found, to enforce dinner time. And so my recommendation is to just start there. If you're having dinner together, no screens while you're all together during that time. That's the break. Now, you can also get buy-in from the kids first around this. Say, like, we all need a break from this. I'm thinking dinner tonight might be a good time. You know, just start small, right? Like ease them into it and say, I'm not going to bring my phone even to like control the music. Dad's not going to bring his. So you can make fun of us if we have, and like, we'd like you to enforce that with us, like to sort of turn the table a little bit so that you're not, right now, especially with teenagers, they're very touchy about being controlled. I don't know if you've noticed this, but you know, they've lost so much control, as we all have. And for them, it's a much bigger deal developmentally to be controlled. And so we don't want to be forceful. And we don't want to use controlling language, and we don't want to be demanding. So phrasing it in such a way of like, when do you think a good time for us to all have a break is? And, you know, my kids they need the break. They understand that they need the break. They don't, you know, I had one who was so addictive, it caused a lot of anxiety to have the break at first, but you know, they adapt, and then they're so relieved, and it's great.
It's interesting because we just watched the film The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen it yet, which
everyone needs to watch this with their kids.
Yes, I know we're not going to talk about that film, but you know, it was very hard as a parent to swallow and watch, because actually, if we are to look at our whole family across the board, I am the worst. Actually, it's not my teens, and I have to almost confront that. I need to practice a better modeling for my kids, and also realize that I am being lured in these ways that I didn't, you know, I just thought, oh, it's another video to click on. Oh, it's another, you know, whatever it is. And I think your suggestions about starting small and enforcing and having your kids kind of help enforce you really will help. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a fortunate thing that you're the worse off, because you have the most control over yourself, actually, right? And it gives your teens a leg up, your kids a leg up, in terms of like, you can go to them and say, I need your help, right? That it's just a better dynamic that way. So that's an opportunity for you.
For the coaching.
I do want to also say that the sort of don't try and limit their time goes out the window as far as advice. If you have a kid who is having trouble sleeping, is like really struggling with depression to the extent that they're like really having a hard time doing anything other than be on their screens, getting out of their room, those kinds of things. Like if you have kids who are kind of meeting their milestones, they're doing fine in school, they're getting enough sleep, they're you know, they are having lots of ups and downs, and they're probably feeling sad a lot right now, but that's normal, right? So anything beyond the normal roller coaster of emotions that comes with adolescence it's a red flag that we need to be more involved and help giving them some more support and some more structure around overcoming what is essentially an addiction.
I love what you were saying about giving them the power, because I think all kids respond better when they feel like they have a little more power. And it kind of reminds me of some of your other advice around nagging. And I think the term you used was, what's your plan? Because I think as parents, we can get into that. Have you done this? Have you done that? And we don't feel good about ourselves. Our kids don't feel good about ourselves. So I love your term, what's your plan, to get yourself out of that nagging role.
Totally. So that, like, the key is to not, you know, kids who've been reminded a lot or nagged a lot will often wait until you start nagging them. And as like a formerly very naggy mother, right? Like I'm kind of
a recovering nagger.
A recovering nagger.
Yeah.
A lot of good ideas, you guys. And I like to share my ideas with my children, especially when the entire outside world feels very out of control. It can be very satisfying to try and control the things in my household, including my children. Anyway.
Especially when the outside world turns to you for advice. You know, you don't, I mean, we admit in our book, I'm also the parent of 4 teens. I actually have one that's now 22, but the other 3 are still in their teens. And it is nice to know that we can, you know, not totally necessarily do the nagging part, but at least understand that, you know, they can hold a mirror up to us too, in terms of, oh, by the way, you know, you might not have done this so well. And we do admit in the Parent Compass, we are far from perfect. We've made our slew of mistakes and are still trying to follow our own, you know, our own guidance.
Trying to live it. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing to do is just to like restrain yourself from telling them what to do. And this is like kids of all ages, really, right? And ask questions instead, right? Ask them questions. And my favorite question, the kids are like, keep joking that they're going to put it on a t-shirt for me, is what's your plan? As in, what's your plan for getting some exercise today? What's your plan for getting your homework done? What's your plan? You know, a lot of the time kids they don't have a plan. They're not developmentally in the place where their executive function is such that they're really into planning, right? Like they're like, yeah, you know, I'm not like you and with your checklists and your like time, you know, organized task list, you know, the whole, like, they're just not like that. And so just asking them what their plan is, my kids have learned, make a damn plan or she's going to make one for you. If I'm like, okay, so what's your plan? And then I challenge myself to 5 whys before I start giving advice. So it's like, what's your plan? I don't have one. Why don't you have a plan? Well, because blah, blah, blah. Why? You know what I mean? Like I just keep answering with why. And finally that like it gets down to the heart of it. And I'm telling you, that's like,
we should just title this podcast, What's Your Plan? But I have to switch gears a little bit into an even harder topic than technology, which is you spend some time really diving into drugs and alcohol in teens. And that is something that is scary and hard to admit, as you know, hard to know how to confront as a parent. And we would love your kind of takeaway or thoughts on, give us a couple good what's your plans for the drugs and alcohol side of things.
Oh boy, is this a big topic. Here's something I didn't see coming. I didn't think that the pandemic was going to worsen our drug and alcohol problems among our teenagers, because I thought, oh, well, you know, they can't party, I can't gather, right? In the same ways. Well, they are. We're seeing a lot. I mean, and this is just anecdotal. I mean, like we're getting some data that adults are drinking a lot more. And so it shouldn't be surprising to us that the kids are also dealing with the really big, really difficult emotions that they have, the grief that they have around all the losses that they're sustaining right now. I mean, they're grieving people that they've lost, of course, right? A lot of them, but also, you know, to a teenager, losing your prom, losing your graduation, losing your conception of the future. These are things that are big for them. And what I am seeing in my practice is a lot of addiction that they can no longer hide. They were hiding it pretty well before and they need it. They're self-medicating. It's the way that they're dealing with stress. It's the way that they're dealing with their hard emotions. And so it's out there. The thing that I most want parents to understand as we move in other parts of the country more towards legalization, something that, you know, we're seeing so much in California right now, legalization of marijuana, is that marijuana is very addictive for teenagers. And it's not the same marijuana that was around when we were teens. It's, the marijuana that was around when we were teens was 2 to 3% THC. It's now, kids now are vaping products that are upwards of 70 or sometimes even 80% THC. More commonly, it's 20 to 30%, but it reacts with the teenage brain really differently than it does with the adult brain. And this is something that most adults and most teenagers do not understand. The vast majority of teenagers today do not believe regular use of marijuana is harmful. Most of them believe that it can help them with their anxiety, but this is not true in the adolescent brain, right? What we know about marijuana in the adolescent brain is that it slows brain growth, because it locks into the part of the adolescent brain that is responsible for the incredible growth of their brains during the adolescent years. And it hinders their motivation, and it tends to, over the medium to long term, really ramp up their anxiety, even though they might feel a little bit better while they're stoned. Or if there are a lot of kids today that are microdosing, and and they're doing it to try and cope, right? So the best thing that we can do as parents is be really aware of that this is not harmless. Like, I just got a question to my Dear Christine column at the Greater Good Science Center that was like, the parent was like, don't judge me for asking this, but I think a little bit of marijuana is okay because he thinks my son thinks it helps him. And, we have been kind of brainwashed, I will say. I mean, nobody loves it. And I often get a lot of nasty email from the pro marijuana lobby, but we've been led to believe that there are medicinal benefits of smoking marijuana or using products with THC in it. And those benefits do not apply to teenagers during adolescence. And age really, really matters too. Okay, this is the last thing I'll say about this. For both drugs and alcohol, age really matters. And so trying to delay as long as possible from a brain development standpoint, that first usage is really important. I have a lot of parents. My favorite one is like, well, I'm buying beer for the kids because I don't want them drinking and driving. I don't want them going, I can kind of control it. I can do this sort of safe social distancing. I want them to have their individual cans. But you know what? Teenagers do not need to practice alcohol abuse. And, what parents will say to me is like, I don't want them to go crazy when they go to college because we've been depriving them of it all these years. And there is no evidence whatsoever that kids who are allowed to drink as teenagers, or who begin drinking, even if they're not allowed to drink as teenagers, drink less in college. In fact, it's the reverse. They drink a lot more in their early 20s, and they become much more likely to struggle with addiction.
Do you have any practical ways that parents, this is a really difficult conversation for parents to have with their kids. Do you have one or two pointers of how they can broach that with their kids?
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk to our kids from a harm reduction standpoint. And that what that means is acknowledging that they might feel really relaxed when they're stoned, and not denying them the benefits of it, but to say, okay, so in our house, we're going to provide you with a really clear boundary, a really bright line. We are not going to support any form of usage. We know that your friends may be using. This is what we want you to know about what happens in the adolescent brain, right, when you use THC. And I have a whole chapter on this in the book, and I break it down in terms of what exactly happens in the brain. Every parent should know what's happening in the brain, and every teenager, I think, should be able to explain that, right? So they go in with the knowledge themselves, and not so you can do both. You can say, here, while you're living under my roof, we're not going to tolerate this. We say no to this. Here's why. We want you to understand it. I mean, same thing with alcohol, like helping them understand like how much alcohol is in a hard cider, how much alcohol is in a beer, right?
And maybe also it's illegal. It's against the law.
Oh,
Look, I have two kids in one college graduate and one that's in college. And I guess, knock wood, thank goodness for me, they're not really interested in that part of things. They have figured out ways to be around it, but not participate in it. So, and they're very open. So I feel very lucky. Those are my first two. Don't know how the next two will turn out, but we always go back to, that you need to be 21 to drink. I mean, you can get, a record, you can get caught, you can do stupid things, you can get in a car accident, you can make bad choices, you can do all the scary stuff. But I think what you're saying, Christine, is educate yourself as parents on the content of really what is happening to the brain and to the body, so that you can educate your kids, and then they can hopefully use that as the little voice on their shoulder, or understanding that you care about them. So you're creating these boundaries and these rules. And at some point, kids will experiment and will have to make those choices as young adults themselves, knowing that you love and support and will be there for them if they need it,
if they need help with anything. Like, you definitely want to have that open dialogue. I think, one of the things I always joke about with the kids is like, you should be grateful that it's illegal. Like, this is your time to have fun without feeling pressure. Like, adults really struggle to be in social situations without a drink in their hand. And so, like, go be silly, not because you're drunk, but because you're fun, right? Like, cause you're like young, and like you don't need it right now.
Yeah. I think that one thing the three of us all share and have shared throughout our careers and our parenting experiences, we love teenagers. We really love them. I mean, I wanted to devote our careers and our lives to working with teens, and you too, not just raising them, but we worked with teens before we had teens of our own. And I think this is such an important, wonderful time of life. And these kids get bad raps, and the whole aisle of books and all the bad movies about the things that go wrong. And they are just such amazing young adults with great ideas. They're so much fun to engage with. And to me, I feel like if there is a silver lining to COVID, it gave me that extra opportunity to have just conversations with these people that we made and created, and to hear what they think about the world. But I just think your book is so useful. The work you're doing is so important. The way you break it down and make, sound bites and tangible takeaways, it just makes it a pleasure to read The New Adolescence. And we feel really grateful for the work you're doing, what you've taught us in our short time together, what you're teaching parents. And we hope that, we'll stay in touch for sure.
Well, I hope to stay in touch too. Yeah.
Can you tell the audience where they can find you?
Yes, ChristineCarter.com. Super easy.
That's easy. And everybody, it is The New Adolescence. Pick it up, buy it from your indie bookstores first, so we support local businesses, and then check out where else it's available, and follow Christine Carter. She has an incredible following and writes this amazing column that you can learn from week after week. And she's got great downloads on her website too. I know that. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.